What happens when the connection between a parent and child isn't completely broken, but something between them has changed? Can you repair a relationship without first discovering what fractured it? Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Priscilla Perspective. Thank you for joining me. I am Priscilla, and this is where we talk about real life issues, human experiences, and stories that matter. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here. In my last episode, we talked about the connection between parents and their children. And since that conversation, I've been thinking about what happens after that connection begins to change. The connection doesn't always break all at once or overnight. Sometimes a relationship becomes strained slowly. A disagreement here, a misunderstanding there, something that hurt someone's feelings but was never discussed. Another disappointment, another argument, another period of silence. And before you know it, two people who love each other may not even understand how they got so far apart. Sometimes the relationship isn't completely broken. Maybe they still love each other. Maybe they still care. Maybe they're just not talking. Or maybe they're talking, but they're not really communicating. And that's an important difference. Because sometimes what looks like a broken relationship may actually be a relationship that is wounded and needs attention. So I started talking to people around me, friends, neighbors, and others, because I wanted to hear different perspectives. A friend, just fiercest, gave me a couple of things to really think about. She shared her perspectives with me, and I wanted to share them with you. And here's what my friend just fiercest had to say. Relationships often become frayed gradually, not just because of one single event. Stress, misunderstandings, poor communication, feeling unheard, disagreements, distance, and repeated disappointments can build up over time. Sometimes one person may feel like they are always trying, while the other feels criticized or misunderstood. A parent and child might stop talking after an argument. At first, it may seem like they're simply giving each other space. But over time, that silence can create more distance. The child may think, my parent doesn't understand me, while the parent may think, my child doesn't want me in their life. Neither person may actually want the relationship to become distant. But hurt, misunderstandings, and assumptions can make it harder to reconnect. Fixing a strained relationship doesn't necessarily happen through one big conversation. Sometimes it happens through small, consistent actions. Checking in, listening without interrupting, apologizing when appropriate, spending time together, showing appreciation, and allowing the other person to express their feelings. Both people can have their own version of how the relationship became strained. Understanding the other person's perspective doesn't mean agreeing with everything they say. It means trying to understand how they experience the situation and recognizing that everyday choices can gradually bring people closer together or push them apart. And that was my friend Just Fire's perspective. Everything she said really made me stop and think. Because sometimes nobody actually decides, I don't want this person in my life anymore. Sometimes the distance just keeps growing. The silence that was supposed to last a few days becomes weeks, weeks become months, and sometimes years. And now both people may be wondering, how did we get here? And that's why I think we have to ask a difficult question. What actually fractured the relationship? Was it one major event? Was it years of little things? Was someone feeling unheard or misunderstood? Was there resentment? Was there disappointment? Was there something that needed to be said but never was? Or did both people experience the same situation completely differently? Because before we can repair something, don't we first have to understand what needs repairing? And I want to say something else. Sometimes people think the answer is simply just apologize, but sometimes an apology is only the beginning. If the wound is years deep, one apology may not erase years of pain. Healing may take time, love, Forgiveness, prayer, honest communication, patience, accountability, consistent effort, and sometimes counseling or other support. Because repairing a relationship isn't necessarily about going back to the way things were. Sometimes it's about building something healthier than what existed before. Understanding someone's perspective doesn't mean you're saying, you're right and I'm wrong. It means I'm willing to hear you. And maybe that's where healing begins, not with figuring out who wins, but with understanding what happened. So, can you repair a relationship without first discovering what fractured it? I don't think we can truly repair something if we're unwilling to understand the wound. And can a relationship be repaired after it's been broken? Sometimes, yes, but there isn't a one size fits all answer. Some relationships may be repairable. Some may require years of work. Some may need boundaries. And some relationships may not be safe or healthy to restore. And sometimes there simply isn't time. One or both people may have passed away before the opportunity to have that conversation ever came. That's one of the reasons I believe we shouldn't always wait until a relationship is completely broken before we try to address what's wrong. What if we noticed the distance earlier? What if we talked about the hurt while it was still manageable? What if instead of saying, I'm fine, we said, actually, that hurt me. Can we talk about it? What if we learned how to disagree without disconnecting? What if we learned how to listen, not just wait for our turn to respond? Because sometimes the relationship doesn't need to be rescued from a complete breakdown. Sometimes it simply needs attention before it gets there. But as I started having these conversations, I realized something. There is so much more to this. Because what happens when you've tried to talk? What happens when you've tried to talk? What happens when you've apologized? What happens when you've reached out? What happens when one person wants to repair the relationship, but the other person isn't willing to open the door? And what happens when the same hurtful patterns keep happening over and over again? I don't want to cram all of that into one episode because that deserves its own conversation. So we're going to continue this discussion in Priscilla Perspective, episode 6C. Before we continue that conversation, I want to leave you with something to think about. Is there a relationship in your life that isn't completely broken, but maybe needs to be repaired? And if there is, what is stopping that conversation from happening? Before you go, please don't forget to like, comment, share, or subscribe to Priscilla Perspective. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and God bless.